Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on how to create ePub publications from Word with a simple tool anyone can use. My name is Dawn Evans, and I'm this week's guest host. I'm the coordinator for the Access Text Network. That is where disability service providers at post-secondary institutions in the US and Canada can easily place requests to publishers for electronic files of college textbooks on behalf of students with disabilities who need them. Access Text is happy to be an associate member of the DAISY Consortium as well. Now I will hand the floor over to our speakers to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Dawn. My name is Richard Orme, and I'm from the DAISY Consortium.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joseph Polizotto. I'm the Alternative Media Supervisor at UC Berkeley.
And I'm Erin Williams from Microsoft.
Hello, everyone. I'm Prashant Verma. I'm working as an accessibility specialist with DAISY Consortium.
And I'll just add my welcome to everyone who's joined us today. So let's get into the session overview. We're going to talk about ePub from Word, why, what, and how. Then only a reckless fool would do a live demo of different bits of software in a webinar, so we're going to spend some time doing that. Then we'll talk about some use cases, and we'll, I hope, leave plenty of time for questions and answers. So to the kind of why of what we're talking about this, and this slide is entitled Beyond the Publishers. Well, those of us that have attended webinars in this series before would know that ePub is a digital publishing format for everyone, for people without disabilities, but also for people with reading disabilities. We know that in the trade, academic, and scholarly sectors, publishers have all adopted ePub in their droves. However, in addition to the published books and journals and articles and so on, we also need publications from commercial organizations, from public institutions, from government bodies, and even individual authors, in fact, to be accessible. So there are many use cases that require a really simple, practical workflow for creating accessible and flexible materials. Joseph, why don't you tell us about that?
Sure. So as Richard mentioned, it's been a need for a long time now that there be a simple to use ePub creation tool. And many of the people who might be interested in such a tool would be, for instance, a university professor who wishes to share documents, research, articles with the whole class using a universally recognized standard like ePub. So an ePub creation tool at a university setting would be very highly desired. In addition to that, ebook authors often will have a task of creating their document in a word processing application, and then wish to supply a ebook version of that text to the publisher. And so having a simple to use tool to create an ebook from your word processing document is also very highly desired. In addition, there are institutions like a government department who perhaps would wish to create a universally recognized or flexible format like ePub of their official documents. And in developing countries and schools around the world, there may be a desire to create educational materials using a format like ePub that can be opened on a wide variety of platforms. Now, in addition to being able to create an ePub in an easy way, it's very important that the ePub that's created is an accessible ePub. So let's talk for a moment about what an accessible ePub looks like. An ePub that is accessible needs to have a reading order that is consistent with the original intention of the author. So all of the text needs to be structured in a way where the text on the page is read in the correct order. So the main body text, the sidebar text is all reading consistently so that the reader knows where he is. That also means that the structure of the book, namely the chapters, the sections, the units, are all structured so that a reader would be able to jump to a chapter if he wishes and find his place easily. The page numbers also is an essential aspect of an accessible reading experience. Students who are using assistive technology or individuals who just wish to jump to another part of a portion of the text will need to jump quickly to that page number using the table of contents or using the go-to page feature in an ePub. When you have table content where there are complex tables, complex data relationships within a table, the ePub needs to have proper markup of the table headers. So if you have a column header or a row header, these cells within a table need to be properly marked up so that an individual navigating the table can know exactly which row or which column they're in. In addition, an ePub that is accessible will be able to reflow on multiple devices so that someone who, say, has a visual impairment or wishes at a given moment to resize the text and use a different font that is their preference would be able to do so without the text being jumbled up and without the text losing its integrity and its structure. Many students, many readers of ebooks and of alternative formats and different devices will want to have the text read out loud for a variety of reasons. So the text must be accessible to the technology that they're using so that they can hear that text read out loud. If there are images in the ePub, these images, if they're essential to the content of the publication of the text, they need to be described. And these alternative text descriptions or extended descriptions also need to be available and structured in the ePub. And finally, if there's any mathematical content, this content needs to be structured in such a way that the individuals using screen readers or assistive technologies can hear that text read out loud using the proper controls that they're used to in their assistive technology programs.
Now, Joseph, if this slide looks familiar to people who attended last week's webinar, it's because this was the same kind of considerations on accessible ebooks from some of the leading publishers, and we're kind of holding the ePubs that could come from a word processor to the same kind of standards. So let's find out what kind of ePub we can get from a word processor.
Yes, so there's a variety of methods currently for creating an ePub. If you're a large publisher, as Richard mentioned, it's most likely that some enterprise software or in-house program has been developed to manage an XML workflow. If you're a smaller publisher, there are programs like Adobe InDesign and other specialist layout software that are used to create an ePub. For most people who wish to create ePubs, however, it's more common to use a simple word processing program. So let's just take a quick look at what some of those popular ones are. So in Google Docs, there's a download as ePub option, and this tool works really well when you have documents that don't need to be separated into chapters and that don't have mathematical content. The tool can create a table of contents that's based on the heading structure in the Google Doc, and it will also retain the alternative text of your images. Google Docs, since it's a cross-platform tool, might be a good way for individuals who are getting started with ePubs to start creating them. On a Mac OS platform, Apple Pages lets you export your Pages document to an ePub with a table of contents that's based on the heading structure of your document. You can also select the cover image from an image on your computer. And some of the features we've noticed that are currently lacking in Apple Pages Save as ePub is a robust metadata editor and a method for marking up secondary languages in the text. And then finally, LibreOffice has a download as ePub directly option from the file menu, and also a writer to ePub extension, which has the writer to ePub extension has a more extensive metadata editor, and you can select your cover image as well for your ePub. While that tool has some promise, we haven't always been successful at using the tool, since it does seem that it requires you to use specific versions of LibreOffice, and also requires you to install other packages in LibreOffice that Writer to ePub requires. And Richard, how about Microsoft Word?
Well, so Microsoft Word has got lots of great kind of capabilities for producing accessible documents. We'll learn more about that in a bit, but sadly, it does not have an ability to produce ePub from it directly. So we were hearing that this is a kind of challenge and it's a need out there in the community. So we talked with Microsoft about that, and they told us about their kind of approach to these things, which is to start with a hackathon type approach and build something quick and easy and just see whether or not people seem to like it and whether the concept actually flies. So we built such a concept, and actually we made progress very, very quickly, and people were already starting to ask about being able to use that. So actually at Accessing Higher Ground recently, we launched that in a kind of beta format, and people started to use it and started to make accessible books, particularly in universities, for special libraries, for people with print disabilities, and for school books too. And we got lots of great feedback, lots of test coverage of all sorts of different Word documents, lots of feature requests, and we had support from a number of different organizations, including WIPO and Microsoft. And now we're in a very happy place that we feel that we've got a great solution for producing ePub from Microsoft Word. So let's think a little bit more about kind of the reasons really for focusing in on Microsoft Word to really build out a great ePub export feature. And we can hear from Erin from Microsoft.
Hello, everyone. So there's a lot of good reasons to use ePub feature of Word. From Microsoft, we really wanted to make sure that we were meeting the needs of the community, and a lot of people are switching over to ePub documents from PDF because they're a little bit more flowable, more compatible, have better accessibility. There's a question in the question answer section of why someone would use an ePub to PDF, and I think that's going to be covered a little bit later in the document. But just in general, there's a lot of accessibility wins for it, and we're seeing a lot of universities and a lot of other customers ask to move to that format. Microsoft Word is the most widely used word processor on the planet, luckily, so I still have a job right now, which is kind of nice. We really wanted to make sure that people who were using Microsoft Word would have the ability to create ePubs as ePubs become more favorable and more popular. We have a built-in accessibility checker that does a really nice job of being able to review a lot of the main accessibility errors that are common in publishing content, and I'll go over that in the next slide. ePub documents are used for accessible book production. And honestly, previously we had a save as DAISY feature, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't deprecating that functionality that people had grown to love and use. For the accessibility checker, I just wanted to touch base on that a little bit because a lot of people don't know about it. Since we've come out with Office 365, we've tried to build in accessibility and bake it in, not just have it as an afterthought. And we want to make it easier for people to be able to create accessible content and make it look professional and polished. One way to do that is to make sure that it's accessible. And so we've built in this really easy way to check for accessibility. So the tool, the accessibility checker, walks through the content and inspects it to identify potential issues. And it could be missing headers or images without alt text, maybe a table layout that might create challenges for people with visual impairments or other kind of reading considerations. The accessibility checker only works on Office 2013 or Office 2016 or Office 365 created documents. So if you're opening a document and it says it's opening compatibility mode, it won't be able to check that for accessibility. But for things from 2013 and beyond, we can check the accessibility of those documents. So it's really easy. It's on the ribbon and you run the accessibility checker. It will review your content and show you a list of accessibility errors found. You'll see a list of those errors. You'll see some warnings and some tips and some how-to recommendations to fix those and address them. On that results pane, if you click on a warning, it will display that item in the document for easy reference for you to go back and see it. This accessibility checker is also in Outlook and in PowerPoint and a couple other things. And so I know when I see alt text missing, it helps to be able to go back to the slide, for instance, of where that alt text was. As you correct the changes, the results pane updates that list automatically. So you'll see your warnings and errors and tips decrease, which is kind of nice. And you can leave the accessibility checker on while you're creating a document. So you can always have this dynamic creation of content that's going to be accessible from the beginning. For Microsoft, technologies like these help us promote digital inclusion and enable everyone in our org and in your organizations to create professional content that can be consumed by everyone, making it easier for all people to have a level ground. And that's really important for us.
Thank you, Erin. And I want to stress the importance of the accessibility checker here, because the WordToEPUB tool takes the Word document and converts it into the highly accessible format of EPUB. But what it can't do is invent new accessibility, such as the heading structures or alt text and other features like that. So it's really essential that we start with a good Word document in order for WordToEPUB to produce a great EPUB, and the accessibility checker is a really important part of that tool chain. So let's move then to the design goals we had for this tool. You know, there are other ways of producing and converting file formats from one to another, but we wanted to make sure it was a really straightforward installation. It was an accessible install and interface, obviously, for people who use assistive technologies. And we wanted its use to be as simple as simply making a printout or create a PDF. We didn't want to kind of take people through multiple steps and give them too many options if they didn't want to have that kind of level of control. Of course, it should create a valid and an accessible EPUB, and it should be capable of producing content in different languages. We've already heard there are use cases in all parts of the world, and EPUB is an international format, and Word is a tool that's used globally, as we heard earlier. And then we also wanted to make sure that we built something with in mind the idea that as we learned more and more about the features that people wanted supporting, and as standards evolved and best practice evolved, we were able to evolve the tool as well. So really pleased to introduce you today to WordToEPUB, and it is simple to install. It can be run from within Word itself, and I'll demonstrate that working from the ribbon, from the desktop, and also from the context menu in File Explorer. And I'll demo those different things in the demonstration section we'll get to in a second. And just at this point, a big thanks again for the support we've received from Microsoft and many other organizations to take us on this journey. You can grab the tool today, if you haven't already, from daisy.org/WordToEPUB. There's a page there with information about it, its purpose and who it's for and so on. But a simple link will take the installer, and then it's a fairly standard install that'll put all the dependencies on your Windows computer, and you can take it from there. So this is the bit where we find out how this thing works. We're going to go to demo mode. So I will just get rid of the presentation, and here I am on my Windows computer on my desktop. And I'll demonstrate a few conversions for you. Let's start with something pretty simple. Here's a Word document. This is something that was sent to me actually from a colleague in India. It's definitions of persons with disabilities. We're starting with something really simple, a one-pager. We have a heading here, we have a block quote, and then we have some more headings with text in different languages. On my Word ribbon, up on the top right, here I have WordToEPUB, and I'm just going to click on that little button there, and up will come the tool. And it's giving me the opportunity to change the file name or to move the place where it's saved in, but I'm just going to click OK in order to start the conversion. It gives me a little progress bar here, and it's made the EPUB for me. I've got the option of viewing the EPUB, opening the folder that it's in, or just closing this tool. Why don't we go straight into view the EPUB? It's opening in an EPUB reader here called Thorium. I'm just going to take the size down so that we can see the whole thing in one go. And here is an EPUB. And if we bring up the table of contents, we see it's very simple. We've got a title and then 4 headings. And just to demonstrate how this would work with a screen reader, I'm running NVDA.
Forum definitions of persons with disabilities. Toolbar region bar. Main content main landmark main content region click out of region heading level 1 definitions of persons with disabilities. Block quote disabilities is an umbrella term covering impairments, activity limitations, and participation.
Okay, so we hear a couple of things here. It tells us that we're landed on a title, then we moved into a block quote, so it's picked up the semantics of the fact that I had a quote marked in my word style there. I can carry on reading through this.
Restrictions. An impairment.
Or I can use just an NVDA key to jump to the next item, so I'm going to use the comma.
English heading level 2.
So I'm on heading level 2, then I've got that paragraph.
Persons with disabilities include sensory impairment, effective participation in.
I'm just cursoring through.
Heading level 2.
Les personnes handicapées comprennent celles qui souffrent de déficiences physiques.
Heading level 2.
Español. Las personas con discapacidad incluyen aquellas que tienen impedimentos físicos.
Heading level 2 Tamil.
குறைபாடுகள் உள்ளவர்களில் நீண்டகால உடல் மன
Exit NV.
Okay, so let's come out of that. I've also got a link in this EPUB here, and that's come through into the EPUB, and if I click on that, it'll take me to whatever I link to within my document. So that was a really simple demo of a really simple document. Let's look at something more complex. By the way, here's the EPUB in my folder that it created for me. The next document we're going to look at is one called Going the Extra Mile. This was one of the original inspirations for this tool. My wife is a university professor. She was writing a journal article together with some colleagues, and I asked her how she would create an accessible version of that. She didn't have a way to do that, but said that if she was going to do that, it had to be really simple. So let's look and see how simple it can be. I'm doing a right click on that file there, and here I have the option convert to EPUB with WordToEPUB. And what I'm going to do here is if I click on advanced, I've got some extra options that have been thrown to me. Joseph mentioned metadata. These are the properties that go inside the EPUB to describe it, make it more discoverable, means that the person can find more information about it. And it's picked these properties up from the Word file. So I have the title, the creator, the date, the publisher, rights, and so on. And what I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to ask it to set the page numbers from headers and footers. And I'm going to I'm going to choose a different style. I'm going to choose low vision. What this does is it embeds a great new font in the EPUB from the Blind Foundation, I think it's called Braille Foundation, sorry. They've produced a font particularly optimized for people with low vision, and this option will embed that within the EPUB. So here we are, it's created it in my folder there. Why don't I go ahead and just view that? And here comes the EPUB, and I can make the text much larger if I like. And here's that nice font. But of course, the properties of EPUBs are such that if I don't like that font, then I can always choose a different one. And there we are, it's chosen a different font within the EPUB for me. And I can do something like change the theme to maybe a sepia, if that's something that I prefer. Here in the table of contents, this particular Word document has lots of different structure to it, and so I get that great navigation there too. And I've got the page navigation that we talked about as well. So if I jump to maybe page 10, it takes me to page 10 in the document, and that's the same as it was in the Word document too. So let's do a couple more demos of this. The next thing I'm going to create an EPUB from is a document that was produced by Joseph's organization at UC Berkeley. So I will run the tool. And it tells me if I just start the tool on its own that I need to select a Word file to convert to EPUB. If I want, I can select a whole batch of them, and so it will, convert 10, 15, 100 EPUBs all in one go. So it'll browse for it. I'm going to pick this one here, which is the one from Joseph's organization. And I'm going to go into advanced, and I'm going to choose actually a different cover image. Let me just pick the UC Berkeley seal. And Joseph, in your organization, you do historically you do page markup using heading level 6. This is an option within this tool. So I'll pick that, and it'll generate the EPUB for me. And why don't I have a look at this EPUB using a different EPUB reader? I'll use, I think, VitalSource Bookshelf. It's just going through doing the page detection at the moment. It's completed that in 16 seconds. I'll close it. Let's try this again. I'm going to go to the EPUB I just made and open with VitalSource Bookshelf. And there we are. It's given us the cover image that I selected. I'll go into that. And then as I move, we notice that page 15 is the first page here. I guess this is because, Joseph, you created, you're creating these documents for students on a chapter by chapter basis. So this represents the original print page in the document. And as I move through this, we would see that the page numbers are changing down here to reflect the page. So if I were to go to page 25, it will take me to page 25 in that document. So one final conversion, and we're going to get a little bit cheeky here. A colleague of mine, a friend rather, is a maths professor, and like many math professors, he produces his materials using LaTeX or LaTeX, and the output for that is PDF. So here we are. Here's an incredibly complicated math article that's written by my friend David. Now, if a student wanted to look at this and make use of something like reflow, well, they could have a go with that. In this product, we would just select reflow, and then we'd be able to make it bigger. It's just working. So there's quite a lot of maths stuff in here, so it takes a little while to process it. And what happens is it struggles with this. So we've actually lost all the spaces with this. So this makes for a really tricky thing to read with increased. Not only is it very slow, it's unreadable really because of the jumble. So wouldn't it be amazing if there was a way to convert this to an accessible EPUB? So let's just wait for Adobe Reader to finish processing, and we'll quit from it. There we go. So here is the text file. So this is the LaTeX file that David would have produced the PDF with. What I'm going to do is use right-click, and here is an experimental feature that we're shipping now with WordToEPUB, which is to convert that LaTeX to a Word document. I get the similar options to be able to change the file name and the folder. I'm just going to click OK, and it will generate a Word document for me, and actually open Word for me as well. And here is that document, and it's loaded up all this math as math objects, which I could now go in and edit if I needed to. Some of the things I should point out don't get converted. So there's something like 6 diagrams in here that are not converted. So what I typically do with something like this is go to the PDF, grab the images, put them in here, and then describe them. But let's go ahead and see whether or not we can convert this to an ePub. I think I'm just going to go with the default settings. So it's now converting this for me. The pagination takes just a little bit longer. It's 24 pages here, but it's having to work through really quite a complex document. So it's now done that in, let's see, 19 seconds. And what you might be interested to note is that it converted 992 math expressions right there. Let's have a look at that ePub. Here we are. It's using the same font that I had before. Let's jump to somewhere in here. And the math is all in here converted for me. And this is all navigable with a screen reader. And there are different options for converting the math as well to images with LaTeX, should that be required. Let's continue with the presentation. So Joseph, could you talk us through, please, the features of the ePubs that come from WordToEPUB?
Sure. So as we can see from the demos, the WordToEPUB tool provides content creators with an easy-to-use tool that exports many important accessibility features. As with some of the other ePub creation tools we mentioned, a table of contents is created from the heading structure in the document, and this tool also lets users select a heading level where a division in the ePub will occur, which can make it easier for instance, authors to create an ePub with multiple chapters. One of the huge breakthroughs I encountered when using the WordToEPUB tool was how easy it was to transfer the page numbers in the Microsoft Word documents that our team is creating to the proper page number markup in the ePub. So navigating an ePub by page numbers, is an essential part for our students, and being able to add this markup in the ePub, which normally had taken a long time, is now made very simple. In addition to heading styles, WordToEPUB also properly handles the lists and block quotes correctly, which sometimes in the past with other workflows that we had used would have required editing the HTML in an ePub editor. So that is another aspect of the WordToEPUB tool that significantly reduces the amount of time that our team has to spend editing files. The tables that have a marked header row in Microsoft Word will have the proper HTML markup in the ePub for column headers. As we saw, if there are hyperlinks in the document, either internal or external, the WordToEPUB tool will handle these correctly, and the footnote or endnote references in the Microsoft Word document that have the links, those internal links, will in the ePub have a backlink, so the reader can return to his place in the document. Another major breakthrough for accessibility with this tool was the proper markup of text where the main language switched. So as we saw in the demo, if the content author has just simply applied the correct proofing language in Microsoft Word document for secondary language text, as we saw in the case of Spanish or French and Tamil, the WordToEPUB tool just automatically will mark up that text in the ePub such that a screen reader user or user of assistive technology will hear the language switch appropriately in the ePub. Also, WordToEPUB is the only word processing ePub creation tool that I know of that allows users to add ePub accessibility metadata, which is an essential feature for ePubs to have to pass a ePub accessibility test. So as we saw, Richard showed in the ePub tools menu, in the WordToEPUB tools menu, you have a number of fields that you can fill in, giving information about the accessibility of your ePub. Finally, the WordToEPUB tool supports exporting mathematical content from your Microsoft Word document into various types of accessible math. So one of the standard method for rendering mathematical content in HTML is MathML, And that's one of the options you have when you export to ePub from Microsoft Word using this tool, is to have the math rendered as MathML. Also, there's an option in the latest versions of this tool which allows you to export the math as an image of the math with LaTeX alternative text, which in some cases may be preferable for users who do read LaTeX and who say may be wishing to read the LaTeX directly on a professional Braille device. So these are just some of the features that have been really revolutionary in our workflow for helping us to create accessible ePubs.
Thank you, Joseph. So now let's talk about some of the use cases. You've talked a bit about UC Berkeley. I want to mention PRCVI. PRCVI is a Ministry of Education funded program which is in British Columbia in Canada, and they produce alternate format materials for students with perceptual disabilities. They're now providing ePubs to students, and they're using this tool to convert Word files to ePubs. And they make Word files anyway of the special books for production of Braille and so on, so they're able to extend the value of that conversion activity that they're doing. At the last count, they'd created around 40 ePub titles using WordToEPUB, and they're producing them on request. And they say they're using this tool because it's user-friendly, easy to install and use. Nancy from PRCVI also added, at first they needed to remediate the files and create the files in particular needs of the tool, but because the tool's been developed further, new features were added based on their feedback, and now they don't have to spend any time adjusting the existing files they have to use WordToEPUB. Joseph, could you tell us a little bit about how you're using the tool at UC Berkeley?
Sure. At UC Berkeley, our general workflow for many of our alternative formats generally consists of going to Microsoft Word from an optical character recognition tool after using an optical character recognition tool. So we were typically using Microsoft Word and then running another program like Pandoc from the command line to create ePubs. And we found that there were many accessibility issues that would come up in the ePubs that we'd create using this method that would require more editing of the ePub directly. And we found that the WordToEPUB tool was a significant breakthrough, since it just integrates seamlessly into a Microsoft Word environment that we're already in when we're creating our files in the first place. And it provides us with a simple click, provides just a simple click method for creating the ePub rather than using a command line. And it also exports many of those accessibility features that we talked about that were really important, which which now with this tool aren't required for us to add later in an ePub editor. So it's the fastest and most accessible tool that we know of now to create ePubs.
And Joseph, you mentioned Pandoc there. Pandoc is currently right at the heart of this tool. It's one of the kind of key components. We do lots of pre and post processing and so on to really bring these accessibility features to life. But we heavily rely currently on Pandoc to do a lot of this work. So it's just fantastic we have that open source project to leverage off. Let me lastly mention Jason Kiss from the Government Information Services from the Government of New Zealand. Jason wrote to us to say the WordToEPUB tool is a real boon. The majority of government documents start in Word and end up as PDF. And then I've deleted some comments he made about PDF. Add to that the usability and access issues with PDF on small screens, and the case for ePub is that much stronger. Now we've got tools that make it really easy for people. Now, Prashant will share with us the use of this tool in low resource and basic skill settings. Prashant, over to you.
Yeah, so the DAISY Consortium is involved in many capacity building projects across the world. We have observed that the organizations in developing countries who have responsibility of creating accessible books are managing with very low and basic resources. Mostly they don't have people who have HTML or XML knowledge. They were struggling to create accessible ePubs. Their production process was very slow. They had to use a combination of 2 or 3 authoring tools, and even then the ePub they created did not contain the required metadata. and features like print page numbers, something which is in high demand. Ever since WordToEPUB has arrived, these groups have quickly adopted it. So they are happy using it because they are able to use Microsoft Word to create the EPUB, an accessible EPUB with all the features they want. And the same Word document they are also able to use for production of Braille books or accessible books. So across Africa, India, the South East Asia, so many organizations are using it, and the production has increased. They are now able to create more EPUB files. The photograph you see on the screen is from a training program in Nigeria. So we had introduced it there, and that group is also now very happily using Word2EPUB.
Thank you, Prashant. So not everyone who's using Word2EPUB has English as their first language. So the interface has been localized to also French, Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, Italian, and there are more in the works. I believe Hindi and Japanese are coming soon. And this is a team effort. We have lots of folk who are contributing to this project. It includes Benetech, both in India and in the US, Dedicon in the Netherlands, DZB from Germany, Editadapt in France, Lea in Italy, Microsoft in the US. Thank you again, Erin. NELS and PRCVI, we heard from them earlier. Results in Brazil, RNIB in the UK, who have supported us with some coding expertise. WIPO in Switzerland, who supported and funded some of the localizations. And individuals, mostly blind and people with other print disabilities, who are helping us with the tool as well. And I want to especially shout out to Nolia in Spain. So takeaways then before we get to questions. With Microsoft Word, you can produce really accessible documents. And we heard from Erin about all the support that's within Word to help you do that. And once you have accessible Word documents, you can then use the accessibility checker to learn about common pitfalls and also spot issues that you overlooked. And once you've got an accessible Word document, you can then make great EPUB from Word now using this tool. And we feel now that Word and Word2EPUB is now the best workflow for producing EPUB from Word processors. So that concludes the presentation session, and we're ready to go into Q&A if there are any questions. I think, Dawn, back to you.
There are a lot of questions. So about 20 right now, and we'll see what we can get through and what we can combine. To start off, I think I'm going to combine 4 questions in one. It's about the formats, dueling between the formats. Why would you use EPUB instead of PDF, EPUB instead of doc, and asking you all to contrast use cases, like why EPUB versus a PDF versus web pages. And then finally, one person said, what is the best app for reading EPUBs for a screen reader user? Because he found that the latest version of VitalSource isn't accessible, and so that's why he prefers PDFs over EPUBs, because what you're doing in Microsoft Word to input the accessibility, that accessibility can be exported to both EPUB and PDF. Any thoughts and comments? And just open it up for discussion on all of those.
I'd particularly like to hear from Joseph and from Prashant. Joseph, you're creating titles for students with disabilities,
Sure.
and Prashant, you're someone who uses assistive technology. Maybe you'd talk, first of all, Prashant, about your kind of preferences for formats and the tools you use.
Yes, so EPUB is definitely accessible. The Microsoft Word document is also accessible, and it is like a favorite format for assistive technology users. But we can't really be distributing books in Microsoft Word format. It is a editable word processing format. If we need to upload the books on a book distribution platform, an online library, then I think EPUB at this time is the best format. And it is very much accessible with a screen reader, with other assistive technologies. We have accessible reading tools on all platforms, on Windows as well as Android and iOS. And I think we'll be discussing them soon, I think.
Yeah, I'd just like to mention, under the hood of ePub is HTML. And with many of the documents that we're creating at UC Berkeley, there's a lot of complexity in files that we're converting. And sometimes we'll have multiple languages, and we'll have complex tables, and we'll have mathematical content. And we found when working with some of the other formats, while it's possible to create accessible versions of those types of files in other formats, it's sometimes harder, or it takes a longer time for us to edit those kinds of files for accessibility. Regarding PDFs, we do still have students who do get PDFs, but for some of our students who use assistive technologies and need to access complex content like mathematical content, we found that using HTML, rendering the math as MathML in an HTML file or in an ePub is a much more accessible experience for them. And in addition, the page number navigation is a really important aspect for many of our students, and ePub being a true ebook format provides an easier method for students to navigate the whole text and have an equal experience quickly navigating the text like their non-disabled peers have when just thumbing through a textbook.
Thanks for the question, though, and I think it sounds like a subject of a webinar in itself. We could spend a lot of time on that particular question.
Absolutely. All right, there's a lot of questions about what can you create the math in? Can it be math type, MathML, Word's equation editor, in order for it to export properly to that ePub?
Well, in the experimental feature that I demonstrated, I went from a LaTeX document into Word, and that then puts the equations in there using Word's own equation editor, OOML format. And so you can either go that route, or you can create equations using the built-in equation editor. We are in discussions currently, and we've had some really positive comments back from the folks at Wiris around math type. And so it's absolutely on our roadmap to have a wide variety of different ways those math equations can be created. So watch this space on that particular one. It's not in there in the tool right now.
All right. In what versions of Microsoft, online versus Office 365 versus installed on your computer, can the Word to ePub tool be used? As well, can it be used with Mac?
So this is probably the most common question we get. So we hear you that a Mac version is highly desired. Right now, we're using some functionality that's only available on the Windows platform, but any new features we're building in, and as we explore, we're looking to see how we can make it cross-platform. In terms of the versions on Windows, we test it from Word 2010 upwards. We keep a really old computer running Windows 7 and Word 2010, and we make sure that the tool runs in that. The latest version of Word has the best accessibility feature and has the widest range of supported features in it.
All right, this question is for Aaron. Is there any possible consideration for integrating the Word to ePub tool into Microsoft? For example, a save as ePub or an export to ePub?
Right now, a lot of the things, just to be completely transparent, a lot of the things that we have planned for the next calendar and fiscal year have been completely derailed as resources get moved on to other things, related to decreased resources because of people are also working from home and schooling from home and reducing hours because of COVID issues. I don't know. I think everything right now is just completely up in the air. I would love to see integration. I need commitment from a lot of different people to do that, and I need budget, and right now I can't answer any of those questions. Sorry, it's a terrible answer.
No, that's fine. Okay, let's see. Let me get caught up. 1 second. There's so many good questions here. I'm just working through them, trying to combine them. All right. Do you all ever work with with publishing companies to help them make their textbooks more accessible? I think that can be answered quickly.
The answer is yes, and I would refer you to last week's webinar, which is on our webinars webpage. There's an hour of really good content where publishers are dueling their different approaches, and their textbooks are kind of taken apart in terms of their accessibility features. If you have further questions, of course, we can follow up with you, but we work with publishers extensively.
All right. Can this tool convert to ePub documents that are based on right-to-left languages like Hebrew and Arabic?
We have not tested with Hebrew, but we have a partner in Alexandria in Egypt who is confirming, oh sorry, I think it's also used in Tunisia as well for the production of Arabic books.
All right. Do page number headings, like when you use Microsoft Word to insert page numbers, will those convert into ePub?
There are various options for the markup of pages, and if you use the header and footer page numbering, you can then set things like Roman numerals, you can start from a different number, these sorts of things. That formatting is picked up and inserted into the ePub.
Thank you. All right. Give me just a moment here. Can you navigate character by character as a result of these exports, or is that more related to the reader/screen reader combination the reader is using?
Prashant, do you want to take that one?
Yes. So the exported text is accessible with a screen reader or a refreshable braille. You can use the assistive technology keystrokes to navigate as you want, word by word or character by character, or like line by line. It's totally accessible.
All right. I'm not sure how to interpret this one, but perhaps it will spark something for you all. Could this be used to replace institutions that are currently using Blackboard Ally in their CMS for online courses?
Joseph, do you know
Sure.
about?
So, well, Blackboard Ally or CMS, a content management system, is used by professors to be able to deliver content either synchronously or asynchronously rather than in face-to-face, like a face-to-face format in like a distance learning or hybrid kind of learning environment. And ePub, the way ePub fits into that kind of learning experience is just providing a student with a different kind of format that they could download of the book or the professor's materials that they wish to share with the class. So it certainly integrates within that. Whether or not it could take the place of a content management system is more of a decision that the professor would have to make of whether all the content could be delivered just through the ePub rather than having all the other rich features of the content management system like chat and PowerPoint presentations or streaming video available through the CMS. So I see this ePub tool as just being a way for authors, for professors in this case, to just create more accessible learning objects for students in their online and in face-to-face classes for students to consume.
And what we hear, Joseph, is that this tool has really great potential for OER materials, so that they're actually produced and uploaded in accessible ePub, those open educational resources.
Yes, certainly. So professors are always seeking for a quick way to create the most accessible document that they can. Whatever the process is that creates the fewest steps possible, that's what they want. So this tool, since many professors, again, as we said, are using Microsoft Word, it's a very common program that they're using. It provides just a very intuitive, easy to use method, and with OER content becoming more popular, then and a lot of OER content being in ePub already, this format, I think, also for professors is an easily grasped format, as a format that they would also like to reproduce their own materials in for students and for other universities to adopt.
Great, thank you. All right, we are coming to the end of this session. Thank you to everyone who joined us for today's webinar. And Aaron, Richard, Joseph, Prashant, thank you for sharing your insight and expertise. If you have any additional questions or would like to connect directly with our speakers, then you can reach out to them using the contact info they provided. Coming up in the next few weeks, we have the following webinar topics. April 22nd will be on making math accessible one step at a time. April 29th will be telling your story, creating better accessibility statements with Aspire. And on May 6th, we will have publishing, accessibility, W3C standards, where are we and how did we get here? So make sure you are signed up to the webinar announcement mailing list to learn about new sessions as we add them. And if you would like to suggest a subject or if you would like to collaborate in a webinar, then please email us at webinars@daisy.org. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.